If you're coming up against a project that isn't coming together or didn't come together in this season, it's worth considering doing something different. Doing the same thing as last season or doing the same thing as the last time you went to the project is probably going to produce the same results. There's a few things you can consider doing differently this time around. Have a plan, get creative, or don't be afraid to be selfish. Exploring any of those three things might change the way you look at your project and approach the process, and might change the results. One of the first things that we lose under stress, and as much as we do climbing for fun, the projecting process can often get stressful. One of the things we lose under stress is our creativity and our playfulness. We get locked in, we get rigid with our behaviors, we go into robot climbing mode sometimes, and we just execute the beta that we've practiced so many times. And the best performances often come with an aspect of creativity and playfulness. Maintaining that ability to have space for creativity and playfulness in our climbing is important in the projecting process. It can be trying new beta, it can be trying old beta that didn't work last season, but maybe it does this season because you're a different climber, you're stronger, you're fitter, you're more flexible. Creativity also comes in experimenting with conditions, time of day, just being open to trying the route in different ways and going back to that important aspect of learning. What can you learn? What is something different we can try this time that might result in a different outcome? Maintaining creativity and playfulness is difficult when we're under a state of performance anxiety, and so using some of the steps we talked about in the planning discussion to enable you to be in that mindset, to have the creativity, the playfulness, to climb with flow, it can really enable some of those performances and flow states that we all remember and we're all chasing to have again. I'm trying Genetic Drifter today, which is a big link up on the rodeo wave, and I warmed up using kind of my standardized warm-up at home. I like to just jump right on something fairly hard for me at the cliff, and so I need a good warm-up at home. So when I get here, I warm up on the second half of my project. But I use that method a lot, where I just warm up on part of a route, usually the end. One of the things I find really useful about doing a warm-up burn on the project or parts of the project is that you have the ability to really spend the time refining how you want to hold the holds, brush them to make sure they're clean, experiment with different positions, different finger combinations if it's a pocket, and mark the holds where you want to grab them with a tick mark. Tick marks can't necessarily stay permanently in many areas, and so it's a good idea to brush them off when your session is done. But if you start your session by putting the tick marks where they're right for you, you'll have them where you want them. I usually spend quite a bit of time refining the subtlety of exactly how to grab each hold and marking it appropriately, because it really matters under fatigue that you have the patterns built up of the right way to grab each hold. Exploring new beta is really important at the beginning of the process, but it's equally important deep into the process when you're getting close to red pointing. Sometimes the sequences that work well in isolation don't work as well when you're fatigued. Fatigue can be specific to a body part, a limb, a side, a foot, anything. Those subtleties of the demands of a route often warrant investigation of new beta for several reasons. Trying different beta and then trying it under fatigue is usually a good thing, even deep in the process, to keep that creative and playful mindset going. Expose yourself to some movement that is less than routine, whether it's moving through a section you are getting through more efficiently. Maybe there's a better way to do it, to get through it quicker, or to get through it with one hand less fatigued than the other. switching up which hand you clip with to allow a little more blood flow in the other hand to save it. Introducing these beta exploration goes or tries using different methods should form a portion of your tries deeper in the red pointing process, but probably not all of it. You don't want to spend all your time trying to sort new beta when you're close to sending, but it is worth spending some proportion of your time on it. The process of learning the beta on a route and sharing that process with others is one of the most fun things in climbing, and is really like an exploration and exciting time. And it can get a little tricky though, because everyone has their own process, and all of us get excited about our beta and we love it and we want to share it. And not everyone wants to have beta told to them or shared with them. Some people want a quieter experience, or they just want to figure it out on their own. And so while it is really fun to engage in the process of sharing beta and learning with others, it's best to check with others first if that's something they want to do and if they want your beta, because they might not. You're getting ready to tie in and leave the ground. Each time you should decide whether this is a red point or link attempt goal where the focus is achieving a certain outcome in terms of linking, or whether the goal of this go is to learn new things and gather beta. There's some overlap and it's a little blurry there, but having an intent to perform on a link should be a more focused, higher paced climbing goal where you leave room for exploration and creativity, but it's not the primary goal of that burn. A beta gathering burn should be slower, it shouldn't involve as much focus on outcome, and it should be focused more on the creativity and playfulness of exploring new movement. One other important way we can approach creativity is through pacing and resting. Figuring out the pacing that a certain route or section requires is part of the beta. It's part of the method that's going to get you to accomplishing your goal. Often we become faster on any given climb as we climb it more. We gain efficiency, we do more of the moves subconsciously, and less of our conscious energy goes into remembering where this foot goes and that goes. At some point, we tend to lose any progress in speed. Having some proportion of your time spent on pacing drills on the route can be really useful. I like to try out climbing as fast as I possibly can, even allowing some slight degradation in technique, and then also climbing slower and try to settle into every position as well as I can. Certain routes are going to favor one or the other and reward one or the other, and it's often hard to know which is rewarded until you try both. And the other thing I consistently learn about climbing fast is you have no idea how fast you can climb until you try it and you time it. The pace we all usually settle into is slower than optimal for most of our climbing, and we can see some big gains in training ourselves to climb faster. There are many variables that affect how we perform on a given route on a given day. This can be as much as where is the sun? What are the temperatures? What's the humidity? What time of day is it? What time of day do I train? Lining up and experimenting with when you feel the best and what conditions are gonna enable you to have the best performance on the route is really important. One of the things I do in the lead up to my performance seasons is I try to put my high intensity training at the same time I estimate the route will be in the best condition. If I have to climb early in the morning, I train early in the morning. If I have to climb at night, I start training at night. Identifying the level of challenge relative to your abilities. Am I strong enough? Am I fit enough? One of the things that many climbers do is write off a climb if they can't do all the moves in their first session. Depending on how much time you have to invest and want to invest in a project, that's not a very important metric. You might not be strength limited in any of those moves that you can't do. It might be entirely technique, It might be some combination of coordination, strength, and technique. Many of my hardest sport climbing projects had double-digit, more than 10 days of working on individual moves before I could do all the moves on the climb. If you're failing on the same move over and over, or falling at the same point over and over, and you're considering whether it's worth continuing in the process, it's important to look at where you are in the season, whether you're climbing into better conditions or out of the good conditions. That can help make the decision. If you're climbing in good conditions and they aren't going to get worse, it's often worth looking at how much you're resting, how much you're recovering between project days, and if some of the planning and low point creativity and beta approaches can help solve that sequence you're falling on. Climbing on other routes besides the project can be an important part of a performance season. The ways that this fits in well are maintaining skill development, maintaining creativity, and keeping our aerobic energy system robust. If you only climb on the project, you often lose fitness, and a lot of that can be just from a decrease in volume. The place where this gets tricky is most climbing costs you something, whether it's skin, recovery, fatigue, any of these things that make it more difficult to recover and have productive project sessions. It's always a balance between maintaining an amount of productive climbing on other routes while not compromising your recovery on the main goal project route. I like to structure my performance seasons with a project day, other climbing day, rest day, possibly 2 rest days. Running it in that sequence allows me to have my best rested performance on my first day on the project. The second day is more focused on moving on a variety of terrain, getting in some volume, climbing on skin-friendly holds that won't affect the same bits of sore skin that are going to need to recover for the project, and then having sufficient rest after that second day on to allow me to show up at the project well rested and ready to perform again. Climbers really vary in their ability to handle volume in general, and this shows up in the performance season as well. Some climbers can do 2 days on, 1 day off. Some climbers can do 3 days on, 1 day off. And the answer for you is hard to come by. One of the best ways that I like to do this is having a standardized warm-up and some high-intensity exercises at the end of the warm-up that allow me to gauge my strength levels. If I see those dropping throughout the season, it's a sure sign that I'm under-recovering between sessions. Risky climbing is a really useful tool to use in general and also in the projecting process. And by risk, I don't mean risk of life and limb. I mean, you're risking the send by climbing while taking more chances that might have you fall onto the rope. We often default and even get more ingrained throughout the process of projecting to climbing with tension and climbing. It's almost like that scarcity mindset where you don't want to risk falling on any given move, on any given go, and so you give it 10% extra in your fingers, or you give it 10% extra in your biceps on every single move. And that adds up over the course of 40 moves to the point where you're using more energy, you're building more fatigue. That pattern shows up over and over with project climbing, where we get more emotionally attached and we use more energy. So risky climbing is a skill worth practicing. We practice moving with less energy, holding on a little bit less to the holds, moving with more momentum, just being willing to fall in places that we don't have to fall, but gaining efficiency on moves that can be done in a more dead point, dynamic, or just a way that we put more weight into our feet.